Hello, today we're going to make prints. So I'm going to show you how to make these with some materials. You might need to go to the store to pick up a couple things, but for the most part you should be able to make these. And the best part about making prints, it's kind of like a stamp, is that you can make them again and again and again. Okay, so here I have an example of a mushroom, but you could do whatever you want. Try to keep the image simple, because you see how it's going to be very, there's not a lot of detail. It's only one color on a colored piece of paper. So the example I have on my computer is an elephant. Very simple shape, and you're going to put it all one color. So the materials and supplies that you're going to need are going to be some acrylic paint. I recommend you can buy like the 99-cent acrylic at Michael's. You'll need some pencils, scissors, Elmer's glue, an eraser. I always like to have scrap paper, a ruler just in case, some colored paper, you can choose the color, and you're going to need some foam. So now the foam is this thin sheet of foam, so you should be able to buy foam sheets at Michael's as well. Okay, so let's get started. Alright. So I like to begin with, of course, my sketch paper. So again, it's just computer paper that I have that's floating around. When I take my pencils, to make sure that they're all sharpened, I generally I prefer using my mechanical pencil. But let's see, what animal would you want, or what kind of shape? So we want it to be fairly small. We don't want it to be more than half the size of the paper, because the print that we're going to make should be about the full size of the foam. Because the foam core is the other material you need. Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. So you can either use foam core or a good piece of cardboard. And I measured it out 4 inches by 6 inches. So if you get your full sheet, just measure it, draw that line, and cut that out. So 4 by 6 is what you should be using. So the size of your image should be smaller than that. So if it helps, you can trace your piece of cardboard or your foam board, so that way you know what needs to fit in there. It's like if I wanted to do like a rabbit head, I can do something like this. So I'm doing it in pencil and I'm doing it lightly. And just to emphasize the point, I'm going to go over it in marker. You shouldn't do this. I'm doing this just so to make sure that you could see it on the screen. So if this is my rabbit, this whole part is going to end up having ink on it, and the rest of it's going to stay bare. So I like to sketch just to get an idea, because as you're sketching you might decide to change things around. So when you're sketching with your pencil, it gives you the opportunity to be able to erase and fix things up. So once you have your complete idea figured out, then you need, and for me, I did a little duck. I had my little model, so I took my little rubber duck and I placed it down, and I drew him. I took my time and I drew it all out, and then I went over it a little darker so you can see there he is in profile. Then I went and I drew him onto my foam core. So the way you want, there's 2 ways you could do this. If you feel confident enough to be able to redraw it close enough, you can draw it on there. The problem is you have to worry about is sometimes you can't erase completely. Let's see if I can. If I draw on here, so it doesn't erase very well. It does erase a bit. So, but once you don't have to worry about if you do have a mistake, because we don't have to have everything erased. So, but once you do have it drawn on, you're going to cut it out. So now here's what my little duck would look like. Well, the other method is I shaded the entire back of my sketch, because I really liked this one and I wanted to keep it exactly as is. I didn't want to make any changes. So I took this and I used not the tip but the edge of my pencil, and I shaded the entire back. And once I did that, I then placed it onto my foam, and I put a little piece of tape on 2 sides. You could do all 4 corners if you'd like, to hold it down, and then I traced over it. And when I traced over it, a little bit of the graphite from the pencil on the back transferred over. You do get a little bit of a smudge on there as well, so you know it's not the best. I can kind of see it, but then I'd have to draw it again for his beak. So you can do that. You can just draw it straight onto the foam, but then you have to cut it out. So as an example, so here's my little duck. I cut out his wing because I was going to make a stamp of that as well. So I did cut out, here's his wing. So I made a couple of those. I made a little hat, and I have a little here, I'm going to make a crown. So I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm going to very carefully cut, because if you cut and you make a mistake, you can't go back and fix it. So I'm cutting out making a little crown. Now the color of this, of the foam core, is not important, because the color of that is, it's going to, whatever ink, whatever paint I use, that's what's important. That's what's going to get saved on there. So, as I'm trying to be very careful, and I'm following the lines, making sure that I cut it as accurately, as close as possible. And that'll be his crown. So the next thing I would need to do is, now I'm going to take a piece of foam core, and I'm going to trace this over the foam core. So like if I have an extra piece of foam core, I would trace this on there and then cut that out, and then I would glue it on. So I have, for my example, is this duck and my foam core. So this is ready to be glued on. So I'm going to take a little bit of Elmer's glue. Now when we use Elmer's glue, try to use just a little bit. So I'm going to place it on. You know, the more glue you use, the longer it's going to take to dry, and the bigger mess you might make. So I try not to use too much glue. Of course, this is not coming out very well. It's got stuck. It forces me to use less glue. And if you use too little glue and it doesn't stick on, you can quickly add more glue to it. Of course, yeah, issue here. Okay. So now I'm going to take my little duck. I'm going to place him on. Try to get him as centered as possible, and just pat him down. Now I want to leave this and let it dry. I want it because I don't want any of the glue to be a part of the problem. So once I put that to the side, so now I have my template. So here's the other one that I used, because I cut my duck out of this and I was able to save that foam around it, so I can have two. And you can see what I did was I took a little bit of paint, and I put the paint on, and then I put a piece of paper on top. So the other thing that you might need is a brush. So I have my paintbrush. I had used it before and I cleaned it, so that's why I had to go get it right now. So now when it comes with to acrylic paint, you have to be careful, because you don't want to create a mess. If acrylic gets into your clothes, it will stain your clothes, and I'm sure your parents would not like that. So always have wear an old shirt, wear anything that you don't care for. Don't wear your best clothes. If you have a smock, that would work very well. So first thing, actually I want to get to my paper. So this paper is way too big for this, so I'm going to fold this and cut it in half. So you could either just use scissors, but what I like to do, I like to really create a nice fold and crease after I fold it in half, and fold it again. You can cut it with scissors, would be very easy. And for me, I like to do this. Okay, so now this is going to be the paper that I'm going to place on top. So So now I'm going to take a little bit of my paint and be gentle because you don't want too much to come out. So if you use a small little container, again, these are about $1 each at Michael's. So you can choose which color that you really like. So, and then I'm going to spread this around. Now it takes a little bit for the paint to dry, which is good because I don't want it to dry right away. I need it to stay nice and wet because we have this, need enough time to spread it all around. So that way we can make a print. If you have extra paint and you can't get it, if it's one of these containers, you can open up the lid or have your parents open it up and you can put the extra back in. You know, just scoop it up and pop it in. For me, I don't have a little extra container for it. I don't have a way to get inside of here. It's too small. So what I might do is just get a piece of plastic or an extra paper plate, and I might put the extra paint on there. Or just, you know, you can simply throw it out as well. So I definitely have too much paint. So again, you want to do a little bit at a time to get a feel for it. If you get paint on your hands, just go wash your hands. Don't wipe your hands on your clothes. It's just going to cause more of a problem. So this is definitely a project I think you should do with adult supervision because of the paint. Okay, so I'm going to move my paintbrush out of the way. I still think I have a lot of paint on here. So if I wipe some of that off. And here's the trick with printmaking. The first time you do it, the first piece of paper you press down, it may not be the best. So I'm actually going to do this on a piece of scrap paper first and see how it comes out. So if I fold and cut my paper, so this is the test run. So this I'm not expecting to come out looking great. So the first one I'll place on, and I'm going to press. I'm going to try to smooth down all the spots. And I want to make sure that the paint gets onto every part of the paper. So I'm going around, especially where that edge is. I'm trying to make sure it's connected. Okay, let's peek. Oh yeah, it's working. Okay, so let's see how we did. I'm going to peel this off. Not bad. There was a little bit of extra paint on the board that got onto there. Not bad at all. So now let's go in with just a little bit more of the paint that I have. And hopefully I can do another one just with what's on here. If not, you know, we can always touch it up. I'll show you how to do that too. So I'm going to take my paper, measure it, make sure I'm getting it kind of where I want it, press it down. So I can feel where my edge is, and where the duck is. More on the corners. I have a little bit of paint on my hand. It's getting on there. Okay, so let's try to peel it up and we'll see what we have. Alright, that looks pretty good. Not bad. So if I wanted, what I could do is I can take a little bit of extra paint and I can smear it around and I can touch it up. So if I have spots here, I can just touch it up and cover it up. Same thing with the duck over here. So if I put a little bit of paint down. I can touch it up. I kind of like the marks that are left because it makes it unique. Each time I do it, it would be a little bit different. But you might want to cover it up. You can cover it up with a little bit of paint. Once it dries, you can even use a Sharpie. You can put eyes on him, just like if I wanted. I can give him a mouth. I can even give him his wings. And you can create multiples of it. So I did a couple before. Again, a little bit of paint there. But if I made a little stamp of his hat, I can cover that up. So you see how they each come out different. This was the first one that I did, and it was way too much paint. But I did also try to use my wing, and I stamped that on. So you can create another different colors for stamps. You can do whatever you want. So these are my ducks. Some of the other examples that I started with was my mushrooms. So now I went online and you can find a lot of different images of silhouettes and you can play around with that as well. So this one is a chalice, it's a cup. And this one, it can be either a woman's face or it's a man playing the saxophone. I like to play with little optical illusions. So it's up to you. I would give yourself plenty of space to work. Make sure your parents are there to help. Wear a smock. When you have your stamp and everything's done, you can reuse it again and again and again. But you want to make sure that you don't get a lot of paint all over yourself. Get all of your materials, get all of your supplies so that you can work and create. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you guys create some amazing things.